Welcome to tonight's meeting of the Environment and Planning Committee. I declare the meeting open at 7 p.m. Acknowledgement of country. I'd like to acknowledge the Bidjigal people of the Eora Nation, who are the traditional custodians of all lands, waters and sky in the George River area. I pay my respects to elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people who live, work and meet on these lands. Apologies. Any apologies tonight? No, we're all here. Thank you.
Chair, I don't have an apology, but I just want to let the committee know that I'll be leaving at 20 to 8 because I have some urgent matter to go to. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Catras. Requests to attend via audio-visual link. There have been no requests to attend via audio-visual link. Notice of live streaming of committee meeting. Staff and public are reminded that this meeting is being recorded for minute-taking purposes and is also being broadcast live to the public on Council's website in accordance with Section 5 of the Council's Code of Meeting Practice. The recording will be made available on Council's website. The Code of Meeting Practice, the order of business is shown in the agenda, which has been made available. Staff and public are reminded that this meeting is open. Doors to the meeting room are to be left open unless the meeting moves into a closed confidential session, according to Section 14 of the Code of Meeting Practice. Only if the meeting moves into a closed confidential session will the public broadcasting of the meeting be suspended. Council's Code of Meeting Practice prohibits the electronic recording of meetings without the express permission of Council. Mobile phones must be turned silent during the meeting. Disclosures of interest. Do any councillors have any interest to declare? Okay, no disclosures. Now we move to the public forum. There are 2 speakers registered for tonight's meeting. I'd like to remind the speakers that speakers have a 3-minute time limit. The first sound you hear indicates that you have 60 seconds remaining. At the second sound, please conclude your comments. So the first speaker is Mr. Adrian Polhill on behalf of Oatling Flora and Fauna Conservation Society, and he's speaking in person on ENV 04523 annual update, progress toward net zero emissions and renewable energy targets. You go ahead, please, Mr. Polhill.
Thank you again for the time you've given me to talk about, particularly about carbon emissions and the future for our children and their children. So my key message to you tonight is think about the future. There's many things we should be doing and there's many more we can do to really protect the further impacts of climate change and carbon emission, particularly in our LGA. I have read the report and I do feel there's some significant gaps, and I wish to express those tonight, and maybe you can ask further questions in the lead up to the full council meeting in a week's time. I understand that the carbon emissions by the GRC currently stand at about 2,777 metric tonnes. This is still quite significant, even though there has been a marked reduction, and I compliment the council on that reduction, but it's not good enough. I believe we can do a lot more. Let's look at electrification, particularly electric vehicles. I understand there's 2 in the fleet. I find that quite amazing that you haven't progressed further on this particular point. I think that there's an amazing opportunity. As you know, I drive a Tesla. We've had the Tesla for 4 years. We charge that Tesla 80% of the time of the running time of that car. We can charge it off just a single set of 10 kilowatt panels on our roof. I understand from the report that the council produces 300,000 kilowatt hours of the current solar arrays. There's a lot to be done by putting that energy back into community batteries, and that's what I think is exceptionally, it's a great idea. Please refer to the Indigo Shire climate policy. I believe there is a brilliant opportunity there for us to put in community batteries and use that energy for not only your electric vehicles, but also maybe the residents' electric vehicles. I'm looking at the time, not much time to go. The major points I want to raise here is there's lots to be done in terms of further planting of trees. And I have already worked with Councillor Marnie on a 20,000 tree motion. And the final message here, I haven't got much time, excuse me, Councillor Marnie, but I want to raise the issue that's mentioned in this report about carbon offsets. This is actually fraught with, there's a lot of fraud in this industry. There are a lot of certifiers, private certifiers, and I want to raise the issue that you have to be extremely careful if the council is going to pursue it.
Can you finish up now?
All right, yes, I will. So please look into that and look at other ways to reduce your emission rather than just giving the responsibility to somebody else by purchasing carbon offsets. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Polhill. The next speaker is Jim Tippett, in person on the same matter, ENVO 4523, annual update, progress towards net zero emissions and renewable energy targets. Please go ahead.
Exceptionally well, and that is what the likes of you and me have done. It's what individuals have done, and of course I'm talking about household solar. It's the one area where we lead the world. Not only do we lead the world, but we are streets ahead of any other country in the world. Way ahead. Even in our local area, and I couldn't find Georges River, but I just found Oatley, there are 16 houses or dwellings per 100 which have solar panels on the roof. Across New South Wales, there are 37, and worldwide, these numbers are exceptional. That's the only good news. The rest is far from it. And it's a problem because if I can ask you to look at the lights on the ceiling, you probably think, well, they're 240-volt lights. Well, guess what? They're not. Right now, they're running at about 230 volts, and I know that from my app on my solar panels. Peak time, they're probably running, when I say peak time, midday, lots of sun, they're running on 250 volts because there's so much coming in from the solar panels that can't be absorbed. Our grid is all over the place, and that's a real problem. The solution, however, is very obvious if people are prepared to take up and actually do something about it. There's two possibilities. One is community batteries, which was alluded to briefly before, and the other is vehicle-to-grid charging. Both options are being used in this country, but at an extremely low penetration. The only instance I'm aware of vehicle-to-grid is in South Australia, where they have made it legal to do this. There's a trial at Flinders University. It hasn't come to other states as far as I know, but it should. Community batteries, as far as I know, we only have one in Sydney, and that's at Cabarita. It was opened a couple of months ago. It's about 412 kilowatt hours. 412 kilowatt hours is probably 35 home batteries, probably 6 electric vehicles. So you can see the potential that is there if we're prepared to embrace either of these technologies, community batteries or vehicle-to-grid. Just in terms of community batteries, it is estimated, and this was coming from the actual people in the industry, that by going the community battery route rather than individual putting on batteries at their own house, we could save about $20 billion across New South Wales, because clearly it is cheaper to put in a few bigger community batteries than everybody having to put in their own. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Tippett. Okay, the next item is confirmation of minutes of previous meetings. ENV 04023, confirmation of the minutes of the Environment and Planning Committee meeting held on 9th of October 2023. Could I call for a mover and a seconder, please? For Councillor Lansbury, and seconded by Councillor Jamieson. Thank you. Can I just ask for a move to a vote on this, please? Councillors, all those in favour? Anybody against? Declare that carried. Thank you. The next item is committee reports. ENV 04123, public exhibition of draft revised tree management policy and draft amendment number 6 to the George River Development Control Plan 2021. Before I call for a mover and seconder, I'd like to have Ms. Quinn, a senior strategic planner, speak on that. Thank you, Ms. Quinn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll give a quick overview of item ENV 041-23. The current tree management policy for George River Council came into effect in April of 2019. It provides a comprehensive framework for the management of trees on both public and private land. And with the introduction of the significant tree register, the policy is due for review. This review provides an opportunity for us to address a number of shortcomings with existing policy, and these shortcomings have been identified by various teams across council, including compliance, development assessment, legal, and the tree team. And in addition, a number of gaps have also been flagged within the development control plan in relation to tree management. The purpose of this report is to seek Council's endorsement to publicly exhibit the revised tree management policy alongside changes to the George River DCP, as well as Council's fees and charges. The revised tree policy has been prepared with a better line of sight with Council's long-term strategic vision and goals. Council has adopted a canopy target of 40%. And the direction of the revised policy has been amended to focus on the enhancement of trees so that the adopted target can be achieved. And the new direction uses the approach of practical tree retention with tree removal as the last resort. This has not been made clear in the existing policy. The revised policy also focuses on encouraging a diverse mix of appropriate tree species to maximize the sustainability and resilience of the urban forests across the LGA. Overall, the content of the existing policy remains substantially unchanged from in the revised. And the most significant change will be the extensive restructuring of the policy to clearly separate the requirements that we have in place for private trees from public trees. So this has been done with the purpose of addressing the existing policy's poor structure. There are 6 other notable changes, and these include amending the definition of a tree. This is detailed in paragraph 26 of the report. Number 2 is retaining the existing 2:1 replacement ratio for approved tree removal by inserting some degree of flexibility for council officers to reduce the replacement ratio where a property needs to have tree removed to address overcrowding issues and in response to the site conditions. Number 3 is to clarify that the offset fee for replacement trees, it is not an option that can be selected by the landowner. The offset fee is only offered by council assessing officers when the site conditions don't allow for all of the replacement plantings to be provided. Number 4 is outlining the process for collecting offset fees. This is brand new to the policy, and it stipulates that a deed of agreement must be executed between council and the landowner prior to the issue for tree removal. Prior to the issue of approval for tree removal. Number 5 is assessing the replacement fees. for trees on private land. It is proposed to replace the thigh evaluation method that's used currently. This method has been developed for public trees, so not really suitable for trees on private land. It's proposed to replace this with the STARS method, developed by the Institute of Australian Consulting Arboriculturists. The STARS method is actually being used by the tree team currently to assess tree permit applications, and the policy just seeks to formalize its usage. And finally, number 6 is inserting a chapter at the end of the policy to give effect to the Significant Trees Register. The tree register will be the subject of a future council report and is not the subject of tonight's report. And just as a final note, these changes, they're supported by a few amendments to council's fees and charges, as well as some minor amendments to the Georges River DCP. The most notable one is the enforcement of the provision of at least one tree in the front setback space for dwelling houses and dual occupancies, as well as an insertion in the appendices in appendix number 8 to address the legal enforceability of council's tree controls. And overall, these DCP changes will ensure that development sites with no trees will provide a new tree to enhance our canopy, as well as to give better weight to our compliance processes. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Quinn. Can I call for a mover and seconder to that report, please? Moved by Councillor Catras. Second by Councillor Lansbury. Thank you. Any discussion?
I just have a couple of questions.
The Director.
The first question is paragraph 43. All offsets fees collected will be dedicated to the planting and maintenance of public trees. Does that include the offsets that are collected from private property?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, it does, Councillor Catras.
Okay, and that'll be going to the public trees.
It goes into public trees, streets and non-reserves, yes, as part of our street planning program.
And the next item that I have is on page 28. I suppose it's paragraph 10, development and trees. Double line, existing trees are retained and incorporated as part of the design within the enforceable tree protection zone of 12 times the trunk diameter when measured at 1.4 metres from the ground level. In the past, it's been customary to look at the drip zone rather than 12 times some diameter. I'm not asking you to change that. I'm just asking, could you please look at it and tell us how, I mean, you can go out to public exhibition, but just tell us how they come to 12 times and what's reasonable. If it's just a figure that's been plucked out of the air.
Through you, Mr.
Through
Chair,
the
to Councillor Catras, yes, I do understand from my discussions with the staff it is industry practice, but I'm quite happy to review the methodology that's placed in the policy, and we'll report that back when we report back after the exhibition period.
Thank you.
Any further discussion or questions? Councillors, I'll put it to the vote. If we could go in the room, please, Ms. McKinley.
Your vote, please, Mr. Chair.
For.
Councillor Amby Haberham. For. Councillor Borg.
For.
Councillor Jamieson.
For.
Councillor Catras.
For.
Councillor Lansbury.
For.
Councillor Wang.
For. 7
votes for, unanimous.
All right, thank you. The next item is ENV 04223, cost to implement wildlife protection area policy. Before we move to move a seconder, I'd like to get Ms. Ballasty, who's the coordinator, environmental sustainability and waste, to give us an overview. Thanks, Ms. Ballasty.
Through the chair.
Council in 2021 undertook an LGA-wide biodiversity study which recommended Council declare 19 parks and reserves within the LGA as wildlife protection areas for the protection of native fauna animals. In August 2022, after considering a draft policy and a comprehensive community consultation program, Council endorsed the wildlife protection area. It formally declared these 19 parks and reserves as wildlife protection areas, being Category 2 wildlife protection areas, which allows for council or council's contractors to control off-leash dogs and roaming cats within these wildlife protection areas. This report outlines the methods for enforcing the wildlife protection areas and is organised in 3 parts. The first part outlining how Council intends to undertake patrols, so that would be through providing Council rangers through business as usual patrols, but also enabling Council's contractors to undertake patrols. The second part of the report covers trapping and seizing, again, either undertaken by Council's rangers or contractors on behalf of Council. And allowing the trapping of animals in accordance with all existing legislation for the prevention of cruelty to animals. And the third part of the report outlines how Council is undertaking education with the community. So that is currently through the erection of signage at all 19 wildlife protection areas, allowing Council to enforce wildlife protection areas. And that signage has been installed progressively across the LGA and has been funded through a $30,000 budget bid, which was awarded in this year's operational budget. The report recommends, makes now two recommendations. The first, that Council note the information in the report, and the second, that Council consider ongoing funding of $20,000, as is outlined in the body of the report, to enable routine and ongoing trapping programs. So $20,000 would cover the cost of roughly 4 trapping programs per year. Do you want me to address that third? Yeah. Thanks. Any questions?
Thanks, Ms. Ballasty. Are there any? Could I call for mover and seconder?
I'll move. Yeah, I just
Okay.
ask questions.
Councillor Amber Haybar moved and Councillor Jamieson seconded. Is there any discussion on that?
No questions.
Yes, sorry, Councillor Jamieson. Yeah, I understand you have an amendment.
Yes, so I do have an amendment first, or can I ask some questions first? Yep. So if I got this right, there's some off. So if dogs are off the leash in the wildlife area, then you can trap them. But doesn't like Moore Reserve have off-leash area? So how does it?
There are a number of designated off-leash areas within the LGA. So in those areas, there would be no trapping of a dog if it is off-leash, on the proviso that it's within the designated off-leash area. Any wildlife protection areas, so in an area where there may be an off-leash area but also a wildlife protection area, both areas are clearly distinguished and clearly signed. So the trapping of an off-leash dog would only occur within the designated wildlife protection area.
And maybe this is going to be part of the procedures policy, but how do you track them? Like, do you focus on, okay, this is where wildlife is certain, that's where you put the money, or you just do when somebody calls up, or how does?
So it could be two methods. The first would be through business as usual patrols by council's rangers or contractors. For example, they're walking through a designated wildlife protection area and saw a roaming cat or an off-leash dog while they were undertaking their patrol. They could trap and seize the animal that way. The second option is in reaction to a community complaint or a call or a request indicating that off-leash dogs are routinely off-leash in a wildlife protection area, or there are roaming cats that are frequenting that wildlife protection area routinely. And then patrols or council contractors would be engaged to facilitate the trapping then.
And I did know that you said that if the trapping is done with the prevention of cruelty to animals, and then once they've got them, so I think it said for feral cats, they will actually, like, they get scanned anyway, but feral cats will be put down because they can't be homed. But so we've got cats, some domestic cats. Then they go to the homes, and it's worked out with Sydney Cats. I guess the concern was whether they're microchipped, what do you call it, neutered, or and working with them, I suppose.
Sure. So, after a roaming cat is seized, either by council's rangers or council's contractors, the cat will be scanned for a microchip. If a microchip is located and an owner can be determined, then the owner would be called to collect the animal. In the event that the cat is scanned and there is no microchip, the cat is either taken to a vet or Sydney Dogs and Cats home for rehoming. If the cat is determined to be feral at the vet, it may be euthanized in accordance with council's management of feral animals and companion animals policy.
There's a set time frame.
There's a
set time frame of which the cat has to be, no matter whether it's feral or a domestic cat, has to be kept for a certain amount of time as part of our agreement with them. If the cat is in any way injured or its chance of survival is poor, and then it would be euthanized. Did you want to add anything?
Yeah, 60 days that period is.
Do you have an amendment, Councillor Jamieson?
Yes, I do. I'll read it from here. So there's just an addition of clause C, which states, where is it? I can't read that far. That council undertake a community education advocacy campaign to notify cat groups, residents adjoining the wildlife protection areas, and the general community regarding the responsible management of cats. Thank you.
Okay, does the mover agree with that amendment?
Yes.
Thank you. Is there any further?
Could I, through the chair, could I ask that amendment, education, etc., does that involve resources of council? Have we budgeted for it?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, we haven't budgeted, but we will do that as part of our business as usual activities. We have, from our discussions today with the animal ranger, we have already done some notification within the vicinity of the wildlife protection area. So one of those points is already done. The others would be some letters and information on our website.
You have an idea of cost? Yeah. Is it going to be extra over your operational costs?
It won't be more. I couldn't give you an exact figure, but it won't be. It will be staff time, maybe resourcing or finding out who the cat groups are to send the information to. But as I say, it would be staff resources. I couldn't give you an exact time or exact cost what that would be.
Well, could you report back if there's an extra cost?
Yes, I'm happy to do that.
Thank
I
you.
will do that through the council information bulletin if necessary.
Before you actually do that, embark on that, I'd like to make an amendment. The amendment is subject to the director indicating that it's within her operational budget.
Director, is it fine with you?
Sorry, yes, but sorry, through you, to Councillor Catras, yes, we will do that.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, could I just ask a point of clarification through to the director? Did the director say that this would fall within her operational budget now? Was that question answered at the start, that you were satisfied that this motion would be covered under your
It
current
would
operational
fall,
budget?
it would fall within our operational budget, yes. That's my understanding, but I can't tell you. We have an animal ranger now, and this would be part of her duties and probably with the environmental officer.
It will be part,
It would be part of,
incorporate. Well,
yeah,
I withdraw the amendment then.
it does take time out of their daily duties to do this work, but it would fall within
Well, if it
our
falls,
operational
within your operational budget, then I withdraw the amendment.
So, Councillor Jamison's amendment stands then. Is there any further discussion? Okay, in that case, I'll put the motion. You can go in the room, please, Ms McKinley.
Your vote, please, Mr Chair.
For.
Councillor Amber Haberhahn.
For.
Councillor Borg.
For.
Councillor Jamison.
For.
Councillor Catrus.
For.
Councillor Lansbury.
For.
Councillor Wang.
For.
7 votes for, unanimous.
Thank you. The next item is ENV 04323, Public Exhibition Generic Plans of Management Amendment. And before we move to any discussion, I'll ask Ms McMahon, our Manager of Strategic Planning, to give an overview. Thank you.
Through you, Mr Chair. Council adopted its generic plans of management back in November last year. On the 24th of July this year, Council resolved to place on exhibition a number of amendments to the generic plans of management relating to incorporating Riverwood Park, Rousdale Park and 25 Joffrey Street into the generic plans of management. Following that resolution, Council's Community and Culture Directorate have requested 3 minor changes. One is to amend the descriptions of the local approval policies within the plan so that they're more generic and at a high level, so we don't need to amend the generic plans of management whenever there is a change in the name of the local approvals policy. 2, to change the land classification of Pole Depot to community, which is its current land classification in the Council's land register, and change the address for Pole Depot from 27 Joffrey Street to 25 St George's Road, Penshurst. The attachments to the report includes all the changes, the ones that were adopted by Council back in July and the ones we are seeking now. The report recommends that Council endorses the amendments to go on exhibition once we have landowners' consent from Crown Land. A further report will be submitted to Council following exhibition of the amendment. Thank you, Mr Chair.
Thanks, Ms McMahon. Could I get a move and second on that motion, please?
Mr Chair.
So moved by Councillor Borg, seconded by Councillor Lansbury. Thank you. Is there any discussion on that item, please? Okay, if there's no discussion, I'll put the motion. If we can go around the room again, please, Ms McKinley.
Your vote, please, Mr Chair.
For.
Councillor Amber Haberhahn.
For.
Councillor Borg.
For.
Councillor Jamison.
For.
Councillor Catrus.
For.
Councillor Lansbury.
For.
Councillor Wang.
For.
7 votes for, unanimous.
Thank you. The next item is ENV 04423, responding to the New South Wales Government's request for increasing the supply of housing in low and medium density residential zones in the LGA. Before we go to discussion, I will ask Ms McMahon, the Manager of Strategic Planning, to give us an overview. Thank you.
Through you, Mr Chair. Council has received a letter dated the 30th of October 2023 from the Minister for Planning and Public Spaces addressed to the Mayor. The same letter was sent to all mayors in New South Wales. The letter is contained in attachment 1 to the report. The letter asks that Council review their local policy settings and approaches in the interest of housing supply and identify existing well-located areas where terraces, manor houses, and well-designed mid-rise apartments can be permitted. The Department of Planning and Environment will be realigning resources to support councils in identifying these areas. It is likely that council will be approached by the Department of Planning to identify areas within the Royal Georges River LGA where terraces, manor housing and mid-rise apartments can be permitted. This, and I believe this to be so because due to the following reasons. The Georges River LEP is one of 33 LEPs that does not permit terraces, townhouses and two-storey residential flat buildings in the low-density residential zone. Secondly, the Georges River LEP is one of 19 LEPs in the Sydney metropolitan area that does not permit residential flat buildings in the R3 medium density zone. Through the planning proposal to address the low-rise medium density code, which was introduced by the state government in 2018, there was a loss of capacity of about 12,600 dwellings in the R2 zone and partly in the R3 zone. This loss has not been totally addressed due to the number of housing investigation areas and the commercial centres strategy stage 2 not being delivered. The then Greater Sydney Commission advised council that it was not meeting its 6 to 10 year housing target. We had a gap of 300 dwellings. The Department of Planning, on review of the council's local housing strategy in August 2020, advised council that it would also struggle to meet its 0 to 5 year target of 4,800 dwellings. The department identified a shortfall of about 700 dwellings. The Mortdale Local Centre Master Plan was scaled back from 969 dwellings to 578 additional dwellings. Beverly Hills was scaled back from 1,500 dwellings to 970 dwellings. Council deferred the housing investigation area in Beverly Hills until 2025. We are also behind in our LEP program and we have not commenced stage 2 of the commercial centre strategy due to budgetary constraints and resources being allocated to the Beverly Hills and Mortdale master plans. And the recent work by ID on behalf of council, not on behalf of the Department of Planning, but on behalf of council, indicates that we've only got 9 years supply of dwellings left within our R2, R3 and R4 zonings. The report provides 5 options that council may wish to consider, but the report does recommend that we hold a series of workshops with councillors based on ward in order for those ward councillors to discuss opportunities within your ward for more medium density housing, the missing middle. So these workshops will probably start sooner than later. Advice from the Department of Planning is that when we send the letter back into the department replying to the minister's request, they would like a time frame lodged with council's investigation. So I submit the report. Thank you.
Move the recommendation.
Can I get a seconder, please? Thanks. Is there any discussion or questions?
I won't talk to it unless somebody has any objection to the recommendation.
Councillor Jamieson.
Yeah, I just had some questions. Now it said short-term housing. I mean, we can rezone, but what are we going to do in terms of how do you do it? Like, if you zoned it, you can't force people to build it. It's not talking about DAs, is it? Because a lot of the DAs are single dwellings and stuff, aren't they?
Through you, to the chair, to Councillor Jamieson, yes, you are correct. Councils don't provide housing. All councils do is provide the capacity for that housing to be built. But the points that we will we are continually talking to the Department of Planning about. I spoke today at a housing symposium where the Treasurer was at, and the Commissioner of the Productivity Commission, is that we can rezone the land, which we have, this council has, and the past council has, but developers are not taking those, are not submitting DAs, and they're not building the housing. Because is it land prices, is it risk, whole range of things. But that will be the point that we will be putting back, and we're not alone here, and that the number of other councils and the local government, New South Wales, will be saying this as well, that more needs to be done regarding how do we get the supply on the ground, because it's not happening, and we're not the only council that's happening too.
The other question I was going to ask, I think we saw some sort of thing with Chris Minns when we were talking about Pattern Book and the 4 terraces, and I think is this going to be in replace to Hires? Because I'm sure there'd be a lot less resilience, not resilience, but people against these sort of medium density housing. Because I know when I was in the LSPS discussion, and that's what everybody wanted, townhouses and stuff.
So I guess what is the options that's been put in this McMahon's report is, I guess, one of those options is that we move away from our centres and where the high rise is, and we look at what's happening in the R3 and R4 lands, which is the medium density and the low rise residential flat buildings. That's something that I think we need to have that conversation at a council level about where do we want to go in that space. My principles and the principles of the planning team is that we protect our R2 suburbs. We protect them for dwelling houses and dual occupancies. You should have medium density villas, terraces and small residential flat buildings in specific zones. And those zones should be close to our centres, close to our railway lines and close to services. But we don't destroy the character of our low-scale residential areas with scattering medium density through it. They're my principles and the principles that I will be bringing to you, because I think that's the position we can take back to the department, is we will create opportunities for medium density housing and housing choice, but we need to do it in a way that works for you and your communities.
Mr. Director, Councillor Cathers.
No, I'm fine. If there's no objection to it,
I've got a couple of questions.
Councillor Bork.
Through the chair to the director. Just in the report, item 4, it says the letter notes the upcoming 2024 local government elections on 14th September 2024, but states that councils should continue to undertake their legal responsibilities under local government and planning legislation to make sure housing approvals are delivered across New South Wales. So my question through the chair to the director is, what are council's legal responsibilities that this paragraph refers to, and are councils solely responsible for making sure housing approvals are delivered? Just, I guess, around the language that is in that statement, to just provide some clarification.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Bork, the General Manager may be able to help me, so may the General Counsel here, about what local government's legislative requirements are to deliver housing. The documents that have indicated to the government of how we will deliver our housing targets is in our local strategic planning statement and our housing strategy. They're strategic documents, and I don't know if they have a legislative framework. My understanding. It doesn't have a legislative framework, no. So I'll finish my question, and then maybe General Manager or General Counsel may want to add to here. So in that framework, I don't know what the legislative requirement on council is. In relation to the language here, housing approvals are delivered. As I've indicated to Councillor Jamieson, it is not the role of council to build housing. And we do our best to make sure there is the supply through appropriate zonings and by moving the development applications through our system as quickly and as efficiently as possible.
Thanks, Director. Any further questions or comments by the staff?
Councillor James, Mr. Fan.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not aware of any requirement. I hope this is coming through. Of any requirement under the Environmental Planning Assessment Act for council to approve housing, because that is obviously a matter that is subject to assessment and the housing being appropriate for starters. So there's no, whilst there may be targets and soft targets from the Department of Planning, I'm not aware of any obligation per se for council to approve housing, and certainly if it's substandard, that there's no obligation on council to approve it. Otherwise, council obviously holds its powers as a consent authority under the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act. So to the extent that it holds the power to approve development, that must be the only thing that the what you're quoting from can refer to. I can't see any other explanation for that.
Thank you for that explanation. I have a couple of other questions, if I may. The staff referred to having a series of workshops held with councillors based on ward to discuss the areas and options for creating opportunities to increase the supply of housing. I just wanted to seek clarification. Although the workshops were done by ward, all councillors would they be able to attend each of the sessions to have input into all 5 wards?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Borg. Yes, all councillors will be invited. The reason that the manager and I have done it by ward, because what that does, it allows us and yourselves to do a deep dive into into that area. You know, we can go street by street, area by area, and it just allows us to focus. There'll be coloured pencils, there'll be paper, there'll be pens. They're all, you know, it allows us to get down and dirty in relation to that. But all councillors are welcome.
Through you, Mr. Chair. It's also the way we develop the current housing investigation areas under the LSPS. We did it by ward, but every councillor was invited to each ward workshop.
Thank you. Just a question on paragraph 35. Council's LHS was approved by the department in June 2021, subject to a number of conditions, including prepare an updated and prioritised implementation and delivery plan that clearly articulates the actions, roles and responsibilities, sequencing and timing to facilitate housing supply, diversity and affordable housing between 2021 and 26, which obviously we're right in the middle of. So I just wanted to know, do we have this implementation and delivery plan? Is that in place at the moment?
Through you, Mr. Chair. The action and delivery plan was lodged with the department back in February 2022. It is based on the housing investigation areas and the commercial upzonings in the local strategic planning statement, and included at that time the Beverly Hills and the Mont Dale local centre master plans. So it's based on what we have now. Yeah.
Just one, this is a simple question, just for an explanation to me. Item 40, part B, it says about by 2046, the forecast with 71,000 dwellings in Georges River, an increase of 13,000 dwellings between 2021 to 2046. 1/3 of these dwellings are forecast to be infill development. Could you just define for me what is infill development and where are some examples in Georges River that this type of development could take place?
Infill development is when you have a medium density zoning or a high density zoning, and you've got terraces, and then you've got a house, then you've got terraces, and you've got a couple of houses. So it's converting those houses into terraces, changing the land use. That's infill development between existing terrace development. It could also apply to the R4 zoning, where you've got houses in the R4 zoning, but you've got residential buildings surrounding them. That's infill development as well. So it just changes to the permissible use of residential flat buildings, change from houses to residential flat buildings. It's just infill. Yeah, planning term.
And in item 41, it says about and you mentioned it before, that Georges River has only 9 years of supply in existing capacity. Could you just explain that to me as well, please?
It goes back to the infill development. Currently, we've got our R3 medium density zoning and our R4 high density zoning. And you may have a dwelling house on a property in an R3 zoning. So the capacity of that site may allow 3 dwellings, not 1 dwelling. So when ID looked at the capacity of our existing medium density and high density zoning and looked at, took out all the strata land, they were left with allotments that had just dwelling houses on them, and they worked out the capacity from that. So in an R4 zoning, 1 dwelling could be replaced by 6 or 7 dwellings. So that's what it means by existing capacity. Yeah.
So in 9 years' time, if all of those were built, we would be at capacity?
Yes.
Okay.
That's right.
Okay. Thank you. That's all my questions. Thanks.
Any further questions or discussion on that report? Okay, in that case, I'll put it. If we can go in the room, please, Ms. McKinley.
Mr Chair,
For.
Councillor Amby Haperhart,
For.
Councillor Borg,
For.
Councillor Jamieson,
For.
Councillor Catras, Councillor Lansbury,
For.
Councillor Wang.
For.
7 votes for, unanimous.
Thank you. Move to the next item, which is ENV 04523 annual update, progress towards net zero carbon emissions and renewable energy targets. Before we go to any discussion, I'll ask Ms. Ballasty, Coordinator, Environmental Sustainability and Waste, to give us an overview. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair. The annual energy and emissions update report is a report that's provided once annually to Council, and it's used to report against 2 key targets that Council has endorsed. The first one being 100% renewable energy in Council's operations, so powering Council's operations, and the second being net zero carbon emissions by the year 2025. I'm sorry, the 100% renewable energy target is also to be achieved by 2025. This report tonight is a good news story. The Council has achieved its 100% renewable energy target 3 years ahead of schedule. So we've achieved that in the last financial year, the reporting period presented in this report. 3 years ahead of schedule, the target date was originally 2025. This report outlines significant progress made by Council in reducing carbon emissions and significant progress working towards that net zero carbon emissions target of 2025. In the last year alone, Council's emissions have reduced by 69%. Over the last 6 years, Council's carbon emissions have reduced by 78%. In the last 12 months, the most significant achievement towards these targets has been the procurement of a 100% renewable energy contract, which commenced on the 1st of July 2022. Council's largest source of emissions, and emissions most within Council's direct operational scope or within Council's direct operational control, is fleets, which comes in at 35% of Council's corporate emissions, and gas consumption, which comes in at 16% of Council's corporate emissions. It's expected these two categories will continue to remain the top two emission categories for next year as well, when you consider a similar report this time next year. In addressing a number of the issues that were raised by the two speakers tonight, there were 8 key categories that were raised. If I just go back to the points raised by the first speaker, the first point was electrification of fleet. So council has in its Environmental Resilience Action Plan committed to progressing towards a hybrid and electric fleet as part of its passenger fleet. The second issue raised was the use of community batteries. So at the moment, the cost for a community battery would be outside the realistic budget of council's operations. Council has committed as part of the Environmental Resilience Action Plan to consider the use of community batteries when the cost is reasonable. Council is also considering a number of external funding sources to enable a community battery program, and one such option is through the energy provider as well. The third issue raised was the planting of trees. So in December, you'll consider a number of reports related to trees, outlining the work that council has done in planting trees and protecting and enhancing its canopy. You've also considered tonight the tree management policy. The fourth issue raised was carbon offsets. So any emissions that are unavoidable, so carbon emissions that we don't reduce, do require offsetting at a cost to council in order to then allow council to claim its operations as net zero carbon. Council has in the past deferred the decision on carbon offsets until the year 24-25. The reason being that at that point, we can then present to you in, again, the similar annual update report, the likely costs of carbon offsets. The carbon offset market fluctuates daily, so it's very difficult to predict the cost of that at the moment, and also seasonally and year on year, they also fluctuate. In addressing the 4 points raised by the second speaker, the first point raised was household solar installations. So council, in establishing its renewable energy target and net zero carbon emissions target, has taken the stance of leading by example. And once council is in a great environmentally sustainable position, council is then of the mindset that we would then encourage the community to also take up and following council's lead. Council has installed 15 solar installations on council-owned and community accessible facilities. Council also has funded in the past and encouraged individuals to install solar on their own individual properties and rooftops. The second issue that was raised was lighting. So I've already touched on council's current contract, and that's part of the reason of the success over the last year, in that council is now procuring 100% renewable energy. So when we're turning on the lights each day, we know that the source of that energy is 100% renewable, which means that it produces no emissions. The third point raised was, again, community batteries. So I touched on that a little bit earlier. Once community batteries are a more affordable price, they can then be considered by council. And the fourth point was electric vehicle charging. And again, in the Environmental Resilience Action Plan, council has committed to rolling out and making accessible electric vehicle charging across the community. It's also enabled and encouraged throughout the DCP. And again, council is looking to lead by example through the use of the 2 electric vehicles that are parked downstairs. Are there any questions?
Yes, I did have some, but thank you for doing that, because I don't think I could have asked the questions that they asked. But So we've got 100% renewable energy. Is that, where does that come from? Is that from our solar energy, solar panels, or you're actually
No,
paying
so
more?
council's got an energy contract with Zen Energy, and Zen Energy own and manage or outsource, where they don't own and manage, a number of solar farms and renewable energy projects throughout the state. So the solar farms, wind farms, whatever sort of renewable energy source may be used or contracted by any council would be owned and managed by either an infrastructure provider or the energy company.
It's paragraph 27, 28,
Thanks, Meryl.
And the other thing when they're talking about batteries, so I know with solar batteries, and I know we're sort of looking into having our own solar battery, and then you actually sell it and do whatever you want. Is that similar to community, or you can't do that at all? Or are we using batteries, or how does all the other battery stuff?
Very simply, a community battery would be looking at a household level battery just at a much larger scale. So it's looking at having a battery in a connected area that's close to an appropriate location on the grid that would allow energy to be sort of passed back and forth and then stored in a battery and used by a number of households or a number of energy users. It could be commercial, retail, industrial energy users. And allow energy to be generated and stored at a local level.
I know how realistic is that to really ever happen? Because I know you're saying it's very expensive at the moment. Like I know when the ones that we're looking at is that it's worth it because we can actually sell electricity, store it and sell, and it's all quite complicated in the wholesale, but that wouldn't work really with the council.
I think as at the moment, our program relates to council operations. Okay, so I think before we start, as Elisa's mentioned, before we start to go out and start to roll this out in the community, I think there needs to be some, what does that look like? You know, what does that look like in relation to how we can do that to encourage our members of the community, our residents and our businesses to be moving in this direction? What type of things can we offer? And I think community batteries would be one of those, but I think we need to do a bit more work on what does that actually look like? How would it, do we trial it in places? How would it serve our community? But I think the first thing, and like we're slowly working through the actions of our resilience action plan, I think we need to keep moving in that direction first before we start to sort of be too ambitious. Would you agree? Yeah.
Council has also made a commitment, excuse me, for net zero carbon emissions for the community as a whole by the year 2050. So as you can imagine, the scale is much larger than council's operations. As Meryl said, we'll focus on our operations and then look at more broadly what we can encourage the community to do.
Okay, could I get I'll move this report because I do have an amendment to it. Could I get a seconder?
Yeah.
Councillor Masri.
Mr. Chair, I was just going to ask a couple of questions, if that's okay.
Sure.
Can I do that first, and then yeah,
sure.
and then I'm happy to second that. I'm often getting asked what council is doing about the provision of charges for electric vehicles, and I know that was something that we've discussed at a council level, and I think we've had notices of motion and stuff like that. I'm just wondering where we're at with it. If I was to say to someone, yes, you can go to X, where would I send them?
So downstairs we've got 2 electric vehicle chargers for council's operational fleet. In terms of rolling out electric vehicle chargers to the community, that'll be part of our community-focused environmental sustainability progress work. There is an electric vehicle strategy.
Sorry, I can't, excuse me, Elisa and Peter, sorry, Mr. Chair. Isn't this something the infrastructure and assets team are doing and a trial basis? Can anyone help me here? Help Councillor Lansbury.
For you, Mr. Chair, certainly we've provided advice to assets and infrastructure team who have partnered with a number of organisations that provide these vehicle chargers. Volt is one of them, because we've reviewed the contracts with them to make sure that it's okay. Yeah. So there's a number of them. The list of them I couldn't tell you, unless it may be for a different committee that can inform the councillors. Sorry, different director that can inform the councillors as to where they exist. Aside from that, there's certainly some coming up in the council area.
So I think my understanding was that we're doing it as a trial program.
Yeah, I was going to say it would be really useful if there is a list of where they are, for example, if that could it be provided on the website or something.
I think, as you heard Mr. Fan say, that we're still in that development stage, but of course
that's what I wanted.
there would be a massive rollout because it's an exciting project for council.
And the other thing is too, I recall some time ago it was going to be a condition, like a DA condition within apartment buildings. There was going to be some sort of electrical charging capacity within them. Did that ever come to pass, or was that just a discussion?
So yes, it is. In larger developments, maybe developments over a certain size.
There's an environmental sustainability clause or chapter of the DCP that includes provisions. Yeah.
So if you were building a new apartment block, you'd be required to, for example, have two charging, I don't know what you call them, stations, spaces, whatever. Okay, that's good. And my final question is, a couple of years ago or longer, I remember putting up a motion about installing solar panels on the roofs of, say, sporting facility amenities buildings. Obviously, to retrofit them would be quite expensive, but I think going forward that was going to be incorporated into newer buildings. So I'm thinking, for argument's sake, the new pavilion that it's down at Hurstville Oval, the Booth Saunders Pavilion, I think it's called. Do we know, has that got solar panels on it? If you need to take that on notice, that's totally fine.
I think we may have to. There is a section in the report that does has indicated where we have solar panels on roofs, and it is part of a continuation of our program. But in relation to it, if it is on the new, we have the Director of Community Culture. I'm going to pass it over to her.
It isn't currently on this one. It was a old project from 3 or 4 years ago, the development of that particular pavilion. However, when it comes to Olds Park, Todd Park and any new facilities, it is sort of being looked at as part of the brief. And assets and infrastructure are also doing a briefing on Jolt chargers, which will be an organisation that can roll out electric vehicle charging across the board. So that should be coming in the next few months.
Any further questions to the Director of Staff on that? So, Councillor Wayne.
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Chair. So just a question about the difficulty in resourcing hybrid vehicles. So is that because the technology has been updated, or what's the difficulty?
Supply and demand at this point, from my understanding. The Toyota RAV4, for example, has a 2-year wait time for that hybrid vehicle. It commenced during COVID, and supply and demand hasn't caught up.
So, but how about the e-vehicle? Have we considered the e-vehicle?
EV, I'm not 100% certain of EV wait times at the moment. We can take that question on notice and get back to you as well. Yeah, that would be managed by the fleet team.
Yep.
Any further questions or discussion?
Mr. Chair, can I just add that what I'll do for council, because there is some concern around the chamber, is that we'll have a briefing on this matter. So we'll talk about that tomorrow at the executive, and we'll come back to council and let you know when there'll be a briefing on it, and we'll have all those questions hopefully answered in that briefing.
Thanks, Mr. Tuxford. I do have an amendment to this recommendation, if that's okay. I think the staff have it in hand. Yeah, okay. I can just read it from here. I'll read it out if that's okay. That in order to facilitate, this is the last point, in order to facilitate Council's target of net zero carbon emissions by 2025, that the General Manager compiles a report into the feasibility of implementing accelerated tree planting programs within the local government area through relevant grant funding and the participation of volunteer and school groups. I'll just elaborate on the reasons for that. I'd like to make this amendment because despite messages from government, councils, the media and educational facilities, the dire effects of climate change are not easily understood by everyone, as it can involve scientific jargon which can be quite daunting, nor are some of the very simple ways in which the effects of climate change can be mitigated. Corporations sometimes implement offset programs involving projects in remote locations, which can be confusing. Tree planting, when carried out locally in our parks, reserves and streets, is an effective way and very tangible way of offsetting council's carbon footprint. When this is done as a volunteer activity using grant funding for the plants, council also gains a financial as well as an environmental benefit, and it will also prove to be a valuable educational tool for the wider community. So I'll just get Councillor Landrieu as seconder, your agreement to that. Thanks very much. Any further discussion on the amendment or anything else? In that case, I'll put the motion. If we can go in the room, please, Ms. McKinley.
Mr. Chair,
For.
Councillor Amby Haperhub. For. Councillor Borg.
For.
Councillor Jamieson.
For.
Councillor Lansbury.
For.
Councillor Wang.
For.
6 votes for, unanimous.
Okay, thank you. There being no other business on the agenda, I declare this meeting closed at 8:12 p.m. Thanks, everybody.